There were a group of Arabs who collected the data dealing in the Quran about embryology and the hadiths dealing with embryology, and they presented it to Professor Keith Moore, who was the chairman and the head of the Department of Anatomy in the University of Toronto in Canada. And at present, he is one of the leading scientists in the field of embryology. After reading the various translations of the Quran, he was asked to comment, and he said, most of the verses of the Quran and the Hadith are in perfect conformity with modern embryology. But there are a few verses which I cannot say that they are right. Neither can I say that they are wrong, because I myself don't know about it. And two such verses were the first two verses of the Quran to be revealed from Surah Iqra or Surah Alaq, chapter 96, verse number 1 and 2, which says, Iqra bismi rabbika alladhi khalaq. Khalaqal insana min alaq. Read, recite, or proclaim in the name of thy Lord, who created the human beings from something which clings, a leech-like substance. So one of the meanings of alaqa is leech-like substance or something which clings. So Professor Keith Moore said, I do not know whether the early stage of embryo looks like a leech. And he went in his laboratory and he analyzed the early stage of an embryo under a microscope and compared it with the photograph of a leech, and he was astonished at the striking resemblance. This is the photograph of a leech and human embryo. Professor Keith Moore, after about 80 questions were asked to him, he said, if you would have asked me these 80 questions 30 years ago, I would not be able to answer more than 50%, because embryology has developed recently in the past 30 years. He said this in the 80s. And whatever additional information he got from Quran and Hadith, it was incorporated later into this book, The Developing Human, the third edition. And this book got an award for the best medical book written by a single author in that year. This is the Islamic edition that was put forward by Sheikh Abdul Majid al-Zindani and certified by Keith Moore himself. The Quran says in Surah Mu'minun, chapter 23, verse number 13, and Surah Hajj, chapter 22, verse number 5, and no less than 11 different places in the Quran that the human beings have been made from a nutfa, a minute quantity of liquid. Today we have come to know in one seminal emission, in which there are several millions of sperm, only one is required to fertilize the ovum. The Quran refers as nutfa. Quran says in Surah Sajda, chapter 32, verse number 8, we have created the human beings from solala. That means the best part of a whole. The one sperm which fertilizes the ova, out of the millions of sperm, the Quran refers to as sulala, best part of the whole. And Quran says in Surah Insan, chapter 76, verse number 2, we have created the human beings from nutfatin amshaj, a minute quantity of mingled fluid, referring to the sperm as well as the ovum. Both are required for the fertilization. The Quran describes the various embryological stages in great detail. It's mentioned in Surah Mu'minun, chapter 23, verse number 12 to 14. The translation is that we have created the human beings from a nutfa, a minute quantity of liquid, then placed it in aqrar makin, a place of security. Then we made it into an alaqa, a leech-like substance, something which clings, a congealed clot of blood. Then we made that alaqa into a mudga, a chewed-like lump. Then we made the mudga into idama, bones. Then clothed the bones with lahm, flesh. Then we made it a new creature. Blessed be Allah, who's the best to create. These three verses of the Quran speak about the various embryological stages in great detail. First, the nutfa, placed in a place of security, made into an alaqa. Alaqa has got three meanings. One is something which clings, and we know that in the initial stages, the embryo clings to the uterine wall and continues clinging till the end. Point number 2, that it also means a leech-like substance. And as I discussed earlier, the embryo in the initial stages does look like a leech. Besides looking like a leech, it also behaves like a leech. It receives its blood supply from the mother, like a bloodsucker. And the third meaning, even Dr. Keith Moore, he says that in the initial stages, the embryo, besides looking like a leech, also looks like a congealed clot of blood. Because in the initial stages of the stage of alaqa, 3 to 4 weeks, the blood is clotted within closed vessels. This is exactly what Professor Keithmore said looks like a clot, in which the blood is clotted within closed vessels, and during the 3rd week of the embryo, the blood circulation doesn't take place. It starts later on. Therefore, it assumes the appearance of a clot. And even if you observe the conceptus, that's after abortion takes place, you can see it looks like a clot. And the stages are based on appearance. It is created from something which appears like a clot, which appears like a leech, and is also something which clings. Then the Quran says we made that alaka into a mudga, a chewed-like lump. Professor Keithmore took plaster seal and bit between his teeth to make it look like a mudga. The teeth mark resembled the somites. Today, embryology tells us that the primordia of the muscles and the bones, they form together between the 25th and the 40th day, which the Quran refers to as the stage of mudga. But they are not developed. They are not developed. Later on, at the end of the 7th week, the embryo takes form of human appearance. Then the bones are formed. Today, modern embryology says the bones are formed after the 42nd day. And it gives an appearance of a skeletal thing. Even at this stage, when the bones are formed, the muscles aren't formed. Later on, after the 7th week and the starting of 8th week, are the muscles formed. So Quran is perfect in describing first alaka, then mudga, then izaman, then clothed with flesh. And when they form, the description is perfect. And Professor Keithmore said that the stages that how it is described in modern embryology, stage 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, is so confusing. The Quranic stage on embryology, describing on the basis of appearance and the shape, is far more superior. Therefore, he said that I have no objection in accepting that Prophet Muhammad is the messenger of God, and that this glorious Quran has to be a divine revelation from Almighty God.